Welcome to At HydePark on Derana 24. Tonight we're talking about agriculture modernization, food waste and transforming food waste into effective, efficient economic activity and generating much needed wealth, not just for us here in Sri Lanka, but to bridge the entire region, look beyond our region in transforming food waste. In Sri Lanka, we understand that a significant portion of municipal solid waste ranging from 50 to 76% is food waste, and this is about roughly 4,000 tons of food waste generated daily. What does this mean to us in terms of economic activity? How much of wealth value can we generate out of this? Can we engage more youth in ensuring that this kind of economic activity is generated? What is the role of the region in coming together, and how much of a role do local entrepreneurs play in bridging gaps existing today? I've invited to our studios an eminent panel, a panel that is already working on these subjects to talk about this and to give us more information about the opportunities ahead and how we can overcome the challenges that we face today. Let me very warmly welcome Cecile Fruman, Director, Regional Integration and Engagement for South Asia from the World Bank. Thank you very much. I know you're visiting Sri Lanka briefly. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Indy. So I'm here because we are putting together a South Asia conference called Sapling. Sapling is the South Asian leadership in improved nutrition and growth. And you may wonder why we're bringing together stakeholders to talk about food waste. It turns out that in South Asia, 30% of all food that is grown goes to waste, and most of that happens in what we call the post-production phase, post-harvest phase. So that phase where you extract the food from the fields and then you transport, process, and there's a tremendous amount of waste. And that waste could feed 300 million people. That's about 15 times the size of Sri Lanka. So it's considerable. And this means that farmers are not getting the value for their products. It means that people are not getting sufficient nutrition and they're paying a higher price. And it also has an impact on the climate. It results in greater greenhouse gas emissions. So our proposition is, how do we turn that waste into wealth? And there are many ways of doing that. First of all, addressing some of the key constraints in that post-harvest phase, better logistics, using AI, using technology, but then also really working with the private sector, driving some of the innovation. You talked about youth, and we're going to be hearing from some of them on the panel. There are a lot of very creative people who are coming up with better solutions. And then learning across the region. This is something where there's so much to be gained from learning from each other, but also from trading with each other. And I'll come back to that later.
Certainly, we look forward to discussing all this. I hope we'd have enough time, but we'll try to manage. Let me also very warmly welcome Ambassador Indra Mani Pandey, Secretary General of BIMSTEC. Good to have you back on Hyde Park.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I believe you'll be talking about how we can bridge gaps here and how we can bring the region together to really address these much needed challenging areas today.
Thank you very much. BIMSTEC as a regional organization has a vast agenda for regional cooperation. Sri Lanka as a founding member has been contributing in development of this agenda and also its implementation. Let me mention briefly here that Sri Lanka leads regional cooperation in very important sectors like science, technology, innovation, health and human resource development. But it has also been contributing in development of regional cooperation in other sectors. Recently we had a meeting of our agriculture ministers in Kathmandu in Nepal. They looked at our regional cooperation in agriculture and food security and also livestock and fisheries sectors. All these sectors are important when we look at the challenges that our member states face in ensuring food security and nutrition security, which is being addressed through this workshop by focusing on reducing food loss and also the loss of crop and food grains. So what we tried to do at our last meeting of the agriculture minister, I would like to mention two specific initiatives that are very relevant to this topic. One, we have focused on how to enhance intra-regional trade in agricultural commodities. So if our member states have opportunity to trade with each other more without any barriers, then they will be in a better position to address their food security and nutrition security challenges. Secondly, we have also planned to create a BIMSTEC food reserve, which will then help member states in dealing with any kind of food-related emergencies that they can face in future, particularly some of the important food grains that we consume, our member states consume. Right. So in agriculture, in food security, and in related sectors, we are moving forward with regional cooperation. Also, some of the related sectors which will contribute to ensuring food security and nutrition security, like environment and climate change, energy, blue economy. We have our action plans, which we are in the process of implementation to make sure that our member states are better able to deal with the challenges that they face in the entire spectrum of sustainable development.
We'll talk more on that, and I'd also like to introduce Shia Vikramasinghe, Group Managing Director of CBL Group, a global Sri Lankan company, a group of companies that took Sri Lanka to the rest of the world. I believe there's much that the private sector can do here to bridge the gaps when we talk about whether it's sustainable development, youth engagement, or transforming food waste.
Thank you, Indra. Yes, I think when it comes to agriculture, Sri Lanka also has a lot of challenges. For example, we engage with over 20,000 farmers directly, trying to bridge that post-harvest waste gap. But the problem is our cost of production in Sri Lanka, due to various other reasons, is considerably higher than the region. So one of the first challenges is making agriculture sustainable. And one of the things that I'd just like to point out is when we talk about agriculture in Sri Lanka, we talk about farmers. But actually, it is an ecosystem that we need to look at the entire value chain. And that is where you're going to get this maximum benefit going back in terms of wealth creation from essentially the same asset or commodity. And we need, as a country, we need to look at our value chain. We need to look at storage, which is a huge contributor to waste. We are also seeing youth not wanting to engage in agriculture. So you need to look at, today, if we are to feed the world the numbers that we need to, we definitely need to look at technology. So agri-tech becomes a big part. We're seeing a lot of innovation in fintech and in maybe marketplace, but there is a lot more focused areas where more investment is needed. And I think regional cooperation also becomes very important here to understand what other countries in the region are doing and where perhaps Sri Lanka could benefit.
Certainly. And last but not least, we also do have joining us tonight Som Narayan, co-founder of Carbon Masters. I'd like to mention that Carbon Masters, a climate tech company, aims to reduce carbon emissions by replacing fossil fuels consumption with innovative clean energy, low carbon solutions. We'd like to hear about your foundation and also what opportunities lie for the region. So,
thank you very much for having me here. It's my second time in Sri Lanka.
Good to have you back.
Yeah. The first time was a holiday, and this time it's now official work. But it's very exciting to be here to tell our story. So I come from Bangalore, where we generate a huge amount of organic waste on a daily basis. We generate anywhere between 5,000 or 6,000 tons on a daily basis. Now, like any other city, this cannot be stopped. But what we're doing specifically is converting organic waste streams to climate-friendly products. Now, the first one is extraction of biomethane from organic waste streams. That can be replacing any fossil fuel. We are currently replacing diesel in transportation as well as LPG for cooking. Now, the byproduct is basically organic fertilizer, both in the form of liquid fermented organic manure and fermented organic manure. So you just mentioned at the start of the program that Sri Lanka is also having the same problem. So on a daily basis, we are talking about 4,000 to 5,000 tons of waste that can be feeding back to the soils of the farmers who are feeding the city, right? So that's the initiative that we're doing. Any waste that comes in, there's no waste that we produce as a factory. We could be having 30 or 40 factories for every city converting these kind of waste streams to products that can again generate revenue as well as make it a sustainable venture. That's our project.
And how successful have you been so far?
We've been, well, we have challenges, but about 6 locations right now, all across South India. We're in Karnataka, Telangana and Tamil Nadu. And we've been able to, first of all, the policy has to be in place, which is what I'm very proud about our country's policy initiatives, where India has come up with solid waste management regulations as well as programs where the biomethane has to be injected into the grid. It becomes a mandatory aspect for oil and marketing companies. As well as there are specific schemes now where farmers are encouraged to use organic manure to improve soil health. And that's across India. Most soil samples have been degraded, right? So the soil organic carbon has to be anywhere between 3 or 4% for a healthy soil. And most samples we are now seeing is less than 0.5%. So unless we put back organic matter back into the soil and close the loop with a circular economy model, we're not going to be able to solve this problem.
Cecile, I think you would have something to add to this. What are the opportunities here? I asked you. You also highlighted the grave situation here in South Asia, how much food waste we unfortunately generate. But how do we really transform this waste to wealth? And on top of that, youth engagement is a priority, I think, for all our countries. Sri Lanka has an aging population, but also youth unemployment and gainfully recruiting youth in skilled jobs is also another challenge.
Absolutely. So I think there are 3 key opportunities that we see. The first is jobs, the second is innovation, and the third is trade and regional trade. Let me actually start with innovation, because I think innovation leads to jobs. As we've been hearing from others on the panel, this is an expensive problem, it's a vexing problem, it's almost a moral problem, because no one wants to see good food go to waste when other people are not meeting their nutritional requirements. And yet we know that through innovation it can be solved, and we're seeing a lot of that innovation being unleashed with data-infused solutions, the use of AI, better supply chain management, better access to markets. It's really that last mile access to market that can be addressed through technology. And then technology leads to more and better jobs. And it also addresses that key constraint, which is youth. Agriculture is not very attractive to youth today, not done the way it was when their parents or the grandparents were in the farms. For youth to stay in the industry, they want to be engaged with technology, they want to be bringing more innovation and creativity.
But could technology be an incentive to attract more youth?
Absolutely. I think it attracts more youth, and more youth are contributing to that. The whole agri-tech, climate technology. And then that leads to the third opportunity, which is really about improving trade. What we know is a lot of the waste also happens in that trade value chain. When perishable goods get stuck at borders and customs, every day in customs at the border means that those products are not going to be fresh and not going to be sold. So addressing that more efficient trade, addressing some of the certification issues, better trade facilitation, removing paper-based, moving towards more automated, more digitized trade, that's a huge, huge opportunity for South Asia.
So we would also, I suppose, talk about non-trade barriers here going forward. I hope we have time. Mr. Pandey, the region, as we talk about how can we scale innovation across borders, how can we bring innovation to countries like Sri Lanka, and also bridge gaps between our countries, and talk about nutrition when we have children, women who suffer from malnutrition, while we also share these stark numbers of food waste across not just the South Asian region, but our larger region as a whole.
I would like to mention 2 points here. One, that there is a lot of innovation already taking place in our member states. And there is an opportunity for our member states to learn from the ecosystems that they have created for innovation, not only in agriculture sectors, but in other sectors too. And that is where, again, Sri Lanka's role becomes very critical, because Sri Lanka leads the regional cooperation in innovation, and it had organized boot camp for innovators to come together and discuss some of the issues related to environment and climate change. And then there are plans to have similar boot camps in future where innovators can focus on other areas too. So there is already cooperation taking place. Sri Lanka would also be hosting a technology transfer facility of BIMSTEC, which then again can focus on different areas of technology, including agro-technology, which can then lead to increase in productivity and can also address post-harvest loss in food grains and the waste that is there, those challenges. Also, again, coming back to the role that Sri Lanka can play, we have been talking about enhancing regional trade, increasing productivity in agriculture. Here again, Sri Lanka has a role to play. And I would like to mention that Sri Lanka has agreed to host the next meeting of agriculture ministers. So it would be leading the effort now for more cooperation in agriculture and allied sectors. And with increasing focus on enhancing trade in agriculture, I think we can address all the related challenges of food security, nutrition security, by enhancing productivity, by creating seed banks for high-tech agricultural crop varieties, by creating opportunities for sharing experiences, capacity building. And here I would like to mention another initiative announced by India. It will create a center of excellence in agriculture, which is going to focus on regional agricultural cooperation in all its dimensions. So we are taking steps where we would like our member states to learn from one another's experience, but also then take future steps where they can address these challenges together. Because while they do take any steps to address them nationally, when we work together regionally, there is better chance that we can address those challenges.
You mentioned earlier that there are success stories. Do you have anything you can share with us, any success story that really are, whether it's our youth or our private sector, can replicate here in Sri Lanka?
When it comes to youth engagement, we have recently had one youth conclave hosted in Gandhinagar in India, which had focus on environment and climate challenges, how youth can address them. So I think we need to enhance more our youth engagement in different sectors so that they can work together to address regional challenges. Youth of Sri Lanka, of course, Sri Lanka as a very highly educated country, you have youth who are very capable and can contribute to the success, particularly in innovation sector. And that is why I think Sri Lanka has got that opportunity to lead regional cooperation in science, technology and innovation. So we are looking forward to leading role of Sri Lanka in these sectors.
Shia, post crisis Sri Lanka, how important is it for us to look at the topics we're talking today, and how much work is the private sector doing in addressing post-harvest loss and also addressing the question of malnutrition and bringing smart technology to agriculture, especially because your companies are also mostly involved in agriculture and looking at new ways to introduce innovation?
Post the crisis, Sri Lanka, who had very good indices in terms of nutrition, you know, we went back a lot. Talking about agriculture, what are we doing about post-harvest? You know, as individual companies, we can look at what we are doing. But really to solve the problem, it has to be done on a much bigger scale. There has to be policy changes. We heard how India is looking at, you know, creating waste into energy. The policies encourage that. So I think we need to see more of that happening. We need to see more government engagement with the private sector. We need to identify the problems. We need to identify what needs to be done. We need to see how we fund it. It's all possible, but for some reason, you know, that flow is not there. I think even in this conference, I was in the conference today, we need to set ourselves targets, benchmarks, and we need to evaluate to see if, you know, we are progressing, because there are so many ideas, so many possibilities. Coming on to nutrition, I think it's really important as a country in terms of food security and nutrition that we grow crops that are relevant. We have a huge problem with stunting and wasting in this country. We need more protein in our diet. Nutrition is expensive. So we need to have, again, policies directed at, I've been always promoting the possibility of having a good food logo, so to speak. Encouraging, educating people on maybe it's better to eat less of a better thing. So there are so many opportunities to do things. And I think it is really creating that ecosystem for ideas to come out and action plans to be executed together with government and private sector.
You spoke about policy regulation needed. What kind of policy shift would you call for within Sri Lanka to create that kind of environment for us in Sri Lanka, especially as a private sector?
So as I said, you know, we focus on agriculture as agriculture output. But really, if you look at the whole value chain, it's where it starts. You start with the seed input. We have policies that make it difficult to do change. So I think, you know, we have to, the way I would look at it is you have to first outline the problem. Okay, we want to get more efficient agriculture output. What are our barriers? We need to sit down, find the barriers, and address the problems. It's not as simple as I'm saying, but we need to start there, because very often in Sri Lanka we have multiple ministries overlooking a topic, which then makes it difficult sometimes for decisions to be taken. I believe this government is trying to do this, but I think we need to accelerate it.
From that, I'd like to go back to whether it's carbon trading, the potential for carbon trading, or reducing carbon emissions. I'd like to know the economic risks of inaction here on carbon emissions, whether as a foundation you've understood it, you're an entrepreneur yourself. You mentioned how in Bangalore you've established success stories, if I may say. So what is really the cost risk on economies as ours?
Well, it's a macro question, but let me try and bring it down to how we understand this. So if you take this topic of just, let's say, food waste, right? It's one of those things that if it ends up in landfills, it creates methane. And if you just link this back, and methane is has the highest global warming potential. And therefore, if we don't tackle this, first of all, it's a cause for methane, which is 32 times more harmful than carbon dioxide. Second, you're having a missed opportunity to create clean fuel and organic fertilizer. Now, the best thing to do for any city would be to tap into this kind of a project where source separation of waste can be implemented. And it's not that we need to do everything in order to reduce the food waste, but a family of 4 would still generate about a kg of waste, considering the peels and the scraps that they would produce as a family. Right? So those aspects of organic waste streams needs to be collected and processed, and the recovery of both gas and fertilizer would then not only cut carbon emissions. First of all, there is going to be a carbon market very soon. There was one which is now not very lucrative carbon pricing, but as we go forward in terms of in a climate constrained world, carbon is going to have a price, and in order to be prepared for to be able to either trade or even to use your carbon emissions from your other sets of businesses to offset, you would need these kind of climate mitigation projects in order to cut carbon emissions, right? And so it's both an opportunity, both in terms of a business as well as a social impact, to both solve the climate crisis in the fastest manner. It's a low-hanging fruit is what I would like to conclude.
Can we talk a little about carbon trading for our audiences to understand too? And on top of that, you have projects there. What does the cost entail? How much of an input do you have to make? And let's talk about the output and how it significantly changes not just lives but impacts and influences economic activity.
Okay, let me explain for the audience what carbon trading could happen in terms of these kind of projects, right? So projects which reduce, so for example, let's say you have 2 set of factories. One is a coal power plant that produces electricity but uses coal, which is a fossil fuel and generates emissions. And another, let's say you have a carbon-lights factory where you bring in organic waste streams, convert them into 2 climate-friendly products. Now, what you're capturing as methane is essentially every ton of methane that you capture is 32 times reduction of GHG emissions. So on one side you have emissions, another side you have reduction. So the trading is essentially, if there is policy, which is where the point about policy is so important. If you now have a policy of going net zero emissions, and countries have signed up. Our own country is signed up for 2070, and many countries have signed up for 2050. Several brands have now signed up for 2030 to 2035 that they would want to see their businesses going net zero. Now, what does that mean? Like we're working with a software company in Bangalore who have declared that they would want to go completely net zero in the next 5 years. Right? So they would have consumption of electricity, business travel, and various other aspects generating emissions. On the other hand, projects like ours, working with us, making sure that they buy the fuel or even own the asset, will enable them to get these credits. So they can offset that. Right? So that's essentially when you trade these two, it turns out to be a carbon emission trading project. Generating carbon generates the credit to offset the emissions. So that's in a nutshell about how the mechanism would work. One pollutes, another one actually solves it. Therefore, you can completely mitigate both of these emission sources, and then you hit net zero. On the side of what's a minimal economic viable opportunity, I would say even collecting waste from 100,000 households would be a good enough project to create about 40 to 50 employment opportunities at the factory. Even a supply chain of maybe about even 200 sets of jobs, where you're giving dignified job opportunities in order to create clean energy, and then again solving about 10 to 15,000 tons of emissions on an annual basis. So for Sri Lanka, if you put this in perspective, you could have about 20, 30 such factories having no waste stream ending up in landfills, but creating thousands of jobs as well as creating clean fuel and organic fertilizer.
Right. I think Shia might have something to add to this also from your own experience and from your background as a chemical engineer, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll have to go in for a short commercial break here at Hyde Park. We're in conversation with an eminent panel representing diverse backgrounds from other countries in the region as well. But we're talking about how we're going to transform waste into wealth and look at agri-modernization with focus on youth engagement. We'll be right back after the short break. To stay with us. Welcome back. You're joining us here at Hyde Park. I'd like to turn to Cecile once again. I believe you're working with different countries in the region. We're talking about trade integration. South Asia, we've looked at for years and decades about bridging gaps in ensuring that there is trade facilitation to countries connecting at least with one another to really reap the potential that our countries have. But how can we use this specific area of food waste and transforming food waste to bridge our region? And what success stories do you have to share with us? I think this will also inspire many others who are interested in this topic. We're talking about tons and tons of food waste. And there is a potential to transform them into real products, and that can be used in our economies.
Absolutely. So maybe let me start with the trade agenda. All countries in South Asia trade agricultural goods. They need to import certain goods, but there are also increased opportunities to export high-value products. And I think a lot of effort being done in Sri Lanka and other countries of the region to do so. That requires fixing some constraints that are in the system. So a food product needs to be certified, needs to meet certain standards in terms of quality to ensure the health and safety of the consumers. And that is a very cumbersome process in this region. Fixing that in itself would facilitate trade, reduce waste. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of that waste is happening at the border, and really increase the value of these products to the consumer, but also to the producers. So when we look at waste, we think of three things that could really change. One is enhancing food security. So by reducing waste, we get better products, faster and cheaper to the consumers. A huge economic opportunity. We talked about jobs, we talked about youth and women benefiting from these jobs. And that's where some of these examples come in. We're seeing amazing innovations. We're seeing entrepreneurs taking banana peels and turning them into sanitary napkins. We're seeing entrepreneurs taking food waste that no one would want to touch and turning into skincare. So there are innovations out there that are beyond our imagination today, but are really happening. And part of that is also going to be changing the mindset of the consumers, showing that there is a value in this food waste and we need to make the most of it. And then the other aspect to this, and we've touched upon it, is really climate change. When we waste food, we're not just wasting food, we're also wasting energy and water, because to produce food, we need energy and we need water. So by addressing the food waste, we're tackling the climate change imperative, and that also is going to have incredible impacts. At the World Bank, we are supporting at a regional level through the trade agenda, but in almost every country in South Asia, or probably every country, we have agricultural programs where we're helping with agribusiness, we're helping with innovation, bringing new technology, addressing the innovation agenda, and really trying to address that very vexing food waste issue. And we're doing this in partnership. We're not doing it alone, obviously working very closely with the private sector, with governments, with foundations such as the Gates Foundation that has been a key partner for us in this sapling initiative. So it's by crowding in all of these efforts, by bringing in innovation, new ways of doing things, leveraging technology and AI, that we're going to solve this.
You mentioned about some great ideas that were transformed into products, whether it's skincare or other products. But what really changed? How did they pivot into entrepreneurship? Was it respective government support, regulation in place, innovative ideas, of conducive environment for these innovative ideas to transform into commercial activity? What really changed for them?
I think often it starts with a spark, an idea, but then to grow the idea, when we speak to entrepreneurs, they have a long list of bureaucratic issues that they're encountering. And I'll give you one example. This morning at the conference, I was speaking to a young entrepreneur from Nepal. And this company is doing two things. They're doing Himalayan dog biscuits, exported to the US. So it's a very nutritious and high quality product. And they're also investing very much in high-end cereals, sort of superfoods for human consumption. So it starts with a great idea, it starts with innovation and a spark, but then to grow the company, you absolutely need to work with government. You need policies in place that are going to support the growth of private sector and entrepreneurship, and the ability to export. And that's what this young man was explaining to me, is that every time they need to certify the products for export to the US, to India, they encounter very strong roadblocks. It's the cost of certification, meeting international requirements, mutual recognition. That is very cumbersome and very expensive. And the more we can address these core constraints, the more we'll be able to unleash creativity, innovation, and solve not only food waste, but really strengthen agri value chains and create better products for consumers and more wealth for producers.
That also takes us to BIMSTEC, and Ambassador Pandey would be able to share with us what kind of support the BIMSTEC extends to private sector, or whether it is individual, startup, entrepreneurs, in terms of investment into in waste to wealth through regional supply chain integration, shared access to credit mechanisms, and whether there are joint green infrastructure projects that are already in the pipeline.
So the challenge of the foods and nutrition security can be addressed in several ways. One of the ways is, of course, to reduce food loss and waste, which will have then economic benefits not only for the farmers, but the entire ecosystem. But if we look at the challenge that we face in agriculture sector, which is a source of livelihood for a large segment of our population, then we need to continue to focus on how to enhance agriculture productivity so that farmers will have more income. Then how we can develop food processing industry so that the value of what our farmers produce will be higher and there will be value addition. How we can enhance agro exports, not only among our member states, intra-regional trade, but also enabling our farmers to export to other countries globally. If we are successful in doing all this, then our farmer will benefit. And then there will be opportunities for more employment in agriculture. We can make our youth more interested in agriculture sector. For example, now youth mostly look at the industries as source for entrepreneurship. But what if we encourage youth to look in agriculture sector for entrepreneurship and implement their innovative ideas to take forward the opportunities which agriculture sector offers. So BIMSTEC is trying to focus on agriculture and allied sector in all these dimensions so that we can address the challenges which our member state face in a holistic manner. So I had mentioned earlier the idea of creating a subgroup to focus on intra-regional agricultural trade, how we are trying to create a food reserve, but also there is an idea to create a seed bank, and then also there is idea to interlink all the agricultural research institutions, and then to focus on climate resilient agriculture. So by addressing all these dimensions of agriculture, I think we'll be able to not only address the issue of food loss and waste, post-harvest losses, but we can enhance the productivity of our agriculture sector, which is very important for our farmers now.
As we talk about policy gaps also in our part of the world, can the BIMSTEC work to bring together countries through a common regulatory framework, at least in terms of managing food waste, promoting smart green jobs in our part of the world?
So BIMSTEC tries to achieve its goals in numerous ways. So one is, of course, deliberations among our member states on policies that they have. Then member states share their experiences. So we engage in capacity building also, sharing of the best practices. And then we are trying to create institutions which can address challenges that our agricultural community faces. So we are working together in different dimensions of the developmental challenges that we face, with focus on agriculture and food security, fisheries, livestock, but also a number of other sectors. I mentioned environment and climate change, energy. We are working in the sectors like science, technology, and innovation, health. I think all these sectors contribute in welfare of our farmers and agro communities.
Shia spoke about nutrition and the importance at childhood, why we must importantly look at it. But I think I'd like to seek a comment from you in terms of climate action. What countries like Sri Lanka can do, especially the private sector? I'm sure you can share with us some projects that your group of companies have also embarked on, and how this contributes to the economy positively, and how we can bring together other companies and bring the private sector to work together to set an example here.
One of the projects I think a lot of us are focusing on is post-harvest loss, and I think that private sector can come together. We're also looking at one step further. I mean, I know all the supermarkets are looking to see how they can, you know, without wasting food that's coming out of the supermarket chains, seeing if you can get it to people who need it. But on a bigger thing, I think we need to look at regenerative agriculture. We need to look at our soil. We have to start at the basics. And I think there are a lot of projects like what we heard about, you know, taking waste, creating energy, creating organic soil. Recently, I was listening, I think when he was showcasing his project in a webinar, there was another project that was taking, was extracting pectin from orange peel and incorporating that into the soil. Therefore, it increased the water retention, I think, by over 4 times. I think we have to start at the basics. It starts with the soil, it starts with the seeds, and then we got to see at the next, you know, the value chain, how do we go forward. So there are the things that we can do are in multitude. I mean, as a company, one of our focuses is, for example, trying to reduce the use of chemical fertilizer, seeing how we could fix nitrogen naturally with the crops, and using more biofertilizer. How do we conserve? How do we mulch? Simple technologies. But we are also using now, we're using drone technology to look at crop health. And
is that something you're doing within your?
Something we're doing.
You spoke about regenerative agriculture. As far as I understand, it's about completely changing the ecosystem or upgrading it of the soil culture.
Actually putting back. I believe, you know, we take so much out. Soils are really depleted now. I also was having a discussion, you know, we use a lot of chemicals in agriculture today, and it's not, you know, chemical almost is a bad word, but you need sometimes, you need it. It's right. Like taking medicine. But at the same time, we need to monitor. I was told in India they have a program where they monitor chemical residue in various parts of the country. I think that's fabulous. I think Sri Lanka should adopt something like that so that we can see whether we're doing the right thing. You know, you take medicine when you're sick. You don't take medicine when you're well. So we need to look at the practices we're doing. We need to educate. I think there is a huge need for building knowledge within our smallholder farmers, making them understand that more is not necessarily better. And I think this is where I think partnerships and these conferences can actually add a lot of value.
In Sri Lanka, whether it's tea or other plantations which have grown for centuries, we've spoken about replanting for years now, but we didn't see that move forward because it's costly. And as you speak about the soil, how damaged it is or how old it is, what role does government play, or how can joint ventures or partners from the region, how can that be introduced to really bring some change?
Policy changes to encourage new technologies is one. Again, I go back to the example where we are using solid waste to generate energy and biofertilizer, and the government is giving impetus to this. You know, it's encouraging because everything needs capital, everything needs money, and you need money, you need knowledge, and I think building, the word I like to use is an ecosystem of being able to, having an idea alone is not enough. You need to be able to execute it. And I think that's the challenge that we have. We have a lot of ideas, but we need to put them into play. I'm sorry, I think I missed a part of what you wanted.
No, I think you've given us an overview of what works here in Sri Lanka and how the region can come together. Som, I would like to speak to you very quickly on not just carbon management, but we spoke about agriculture here, bringing more youth, technology driven. So how do we balance ensuring that the environment is safeguarded, bringing innovations, technology into this, but also transforming what we already have into what we can use and not looking at surplus waste, and addressing all these areas that we talk about through government intervention? What regulatory reforms can you share with us that really helped startups and entrepreneurs as you?
Well, I think I have enough content in terms of like the various aspects. That it's a very long chain, right? I fully agree. You know, ideas will remain ideas unless there is proper support and the ecosystem needs to come together. It's just not the government policy, right? Firstly, it is the policy because investors will not come in if there is no policy. And that in my own journey, we've seen that you know, we've been doing this whole work around reducing carbon emissions for now over a decade, right? In my own journey, now I've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, when the policy shift happens, then the whole ecosystem gets excited about it. And it starts with long-term policy initiatives that can give assurance to entrepreneurs. First of all, entrepreneurs are, you know, driven by passion. They just want to do it. But then the investment community, you can do a lot of pilots and small investments, angel investments, but over and above that, if you have to really scale any business, you need long-term policy and backed with proper asset infrastructure investment. You know, there's a lot of emphasis being, you know, on scale up, etc. But and people love business models which are asset light. But the question that, you know, we are trying to address here, the problem that we are trying to address here requires infrastructure capital. Banks need to give enough debt, long-term debt, and these projects will happen. You know, the IRRs are attractive enough like any other business. So therefore, the policy needs to be put in place. And when I say policy, we have to, let's address, you know, I'm being very specific here, on the food waste, right? Any country or any city generates food waste, can create multiple products out of it. Now, at the, you know, there are also issues around multiple policies being there. For example, let's say a city agrees to do waste to energy. Now, waste to energy is not same as converting into a circular economy model. That's incineration, right? And I don't think any country, at least in this region, should be going in for waste to energy. we should be trying to extract biomethane as well as organic fertilizer, because the soils need to be going back, and the soils needs to get enriched with the organic fertilizer. Whereas in the incineration route, you actually then end up burning the waste. So here's a very policy distinction. It's important policy needs to come in, but it's the right kind of policy that needs to come in. Right? One will end up burning the waste, which is not for this region of countries, because we have enough organics in our waste streams that needs to be converted into organic fertilizer going back to the soil, as well as recover the methane that can be used to replace fossil fuels. So that's one quick example.
Interesting. I'm told, our producers tell me we don't have much time, so open question to the panel. We're talking about intra-regional trade. We couldn't focus much on that. How we can bridge the region through, whether it's waste to energy, whether it's nutrition, and whether it's smart jobs, green jobs for our youth, where we see cross-border partnerships. I'm sure Mr. Pandey also will have something to add, but I think we have a minute each for our panelists for your closing remarks. Cecile?
So I would say two things. One is learning from each other, as we've been learning from each other here on this panel, but that is a large part of what we're trying to do over these 2 days, is to bring good examples, inspire not only policymakers, but also entrepreneurs. And then I do think that there is a common agenda. No country can survive without trade in agricultural products. It is a requirement on the import side, on the export side. There are incredible opportunities that lie ahead for entrepreneurs. Exporting higher value added goods is very much in the policy objectives of every country here in South Asia. So I think that is a policy imperative. How do we enable that? And how do we, as many people have said on this panel, create that ecosystem where you bring public and private together, you bring finance to bear, you bring innovation, and you unleash a lot of that creativity and for the good of producers and consumers.
Mr. Pandey?
We as member states in our region, Bay of Bengal initiative is very important for us, BIMSTEC, because we face shared challenges, whether we look at agriculture sector or other sectors. And if we work together, we can better deal with those challenges. And that has been the basis for our member state to give so much support to BIMSTEC. We have a very vast agenda of 16 sectors. And I believe if we work together, we can address the sustainable development challenges that we face, so we can create more prosperity for our member states. And that has been the motto of BIMSTEC, to work together with our member states for common prosperity and to have our developmental goals realized.
Sure. Shia?
Well, I would like to see strengthening of the ecosystems. I would like to see more conversations happening with government and the private sector, addressing the problems that we have and working together for solutions, because I believe the private sector has a very large role to play, but we can't do it together. You know, you can't clap with one hand. And I would like to see more dialogue and action creating these ecosystems.
Som?
Well, I just want to finish up by saying it's a huge opportunity. We should all work together. It's better together. We can solve this. Food waste, first of all, we should do everything in order to reduce food waste. But if there is still unavoidable amount of food waste that we all generate, that shouldn't go to landfills. It should be going back to the soils, enriching, fixing the soils, as well as recover clean energy.
Right, thank you very much. That's all the time we have here, whether it's policy leadership for improved nutrition and growth, whether it's waste to wealth or creating smart green jobs. We're talking about the region working together, private sector involvement, governments bringing policy changes. I'd like to thank the panel tonight. Cecile Fruman of the World Bank, Director, Regional Infrastructure and Engagement for South Asia and Acting Director for Bhutan at the World Bank. I'd also like to thank Ambassador Indra Mani Pandey, Secretary General for BIMSTEC, And I'd like to thank Shia Vikramasinghe, Group Managing Director for the CBL Group here in Sri Lanka. And I did mention a chemical engineer, the academic background of Shia's, and also Som Narayan from India, co-founder of Carbon Masters. Thank you very much for your time here at Hyde Park. We were talking about agriculture, smart agriculture, green jobs, youth engagements, and how Southeast Asia, South Asia, Sri Lanka can come together as a region to bridge our gaps and look at greater opportunities. We'll see you again next week with yet another discussion here at Hyde Park. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.